or ABC. So let me give a little description of that. On the left here, I have a little graph that pictures how much labor cost we have compared to how much overhead we have. So with this left graph, let's assume that we have a very labor intensive process and we make a standard product and a custom product. The demand, we have 8,000 units of the standard product that we sell and 2,000 of the custom products. And the standard product takes us 5 hours to produce, and the custom product takes us 9 hours, a little more hands-on customization for that custom product. So in total, we're going to spend for 8,000 units, for 8,000 standard units at 5 hours apiece, we're going to spend 40,000 hours of labor producing the standard units. We're only making 2,000 of the custom units, but we're spending $9 hours on each one of those. So that's a total of 18,000 hours on the custom. So in total, we're incurring 58,000 hours of work. Most of it is going towards the standard product. Well, let's assume that we have $100,000 of overhead cost. Now the labor cost would be assigned based on the labor rate and the number of hours that we're working. But how do we assign the overhead cost? Because everything goes through the factory, and that overhead cost consists of the power, the utility costs, the lighting, the heating, the air, the heavy-duty equipment depreciation, and so forth. Well, if we divided all that by the number of labor hours, we would get $1.72 per labor hour. That's 100,000 divided by 58,000 hours, $1.72 per labor hour. So that means that each of the standard units would be assigned 5 hours of overhead, and each of the custom units would be assigned 9 hours of overhead. Well, what if we decided to automate a bunch of this process? So we put in a bunch of automated equipment, and what that does is it replaces some of our labor cost. So we have a lot more overhead cost here, but the purpose of it is to replace a lot of those standard units. So now, under this new scenario, this automated line, we make the standard items. We're still making 8,000 of them, but we only have to spend 2 hours of labor because most of the production is on the equipment, the machine time. We're still making 2,000 of the custom items using 9 hours apiece. So in total, we're going to have 16,000 labor hours to make the standard product and still 18,000 for the custom. That's 34,000 hours total. And let's assume because of all of this new equipment, our overhead costs have tripled. They've gone to 300,000. Well, if we're still using the labor hours to allocate that overhead, 300,000 divided by the 34,000 hours, that's $8.82 per hour now for the labor rate. 2 hours goes to the standard unit. 9 hours of the overhead would go to the custom unit. And so the reason we brought in all this automated equipment was to primarily to produce the standard units. We're still being very hands-on with the customized. However, if we still use the old method of allocating the cost, we're going to assign most of the dollars to the custom product because it's utilizing most of the labor hours. So again, we spent the money on the overhead to produce the standard units, but it's the custom units that get penalized if we continue to assign cost based on the labor hours per unit. And in total, if you go through this allocated out under the old way, 31% of the overhead costs got assigned to the custom product, almost 70% got assigned to the standard, and that would make sense. We were the standard items were taking up a lot more time in there. However, under the new method, we're shifting, and now over half of the overhead is being assigned to the custom product when really it was the standard product that we were utilizing all of that equipment for. So the point is, once you have modified your production process and once you've added all of this new technology and so forth, sticking with an old method of assigning your cost may misrepresent what it's actually costing you to make those products. So finding a different way to allocate cost is the point of this chapter on activity-based costing. For example, some of your costs have to do with simply designing the product and designing the process. So maybe those costs should just be allocated based on how many products we have. When you actually start producing items, every time we set up the equipment for this run versus that run, we incur some setup cost. And so maybe the setup cost should be allocated based on how many setups we're making, regardless of how many units we're actually producing within that. And then, of course, there are still some costs that would be driven at the unit level or even the customer level. So again, this chapter is about understanding your cost behaviors, but even going a little deeper and understanding what is truly driving the cost that we see within our operations.